Hello, this is Alex from ONG Tax and Accounting Services. So in this video, we're going to take a look at one of the most important forms that's available for taxpayers and business owners. And this form has to do with when you, as a taxpayer or a business owner, needs to inform the IRS of business address changes, location, or responsible party changes. A business uses Form 8822B, and a person, such as individual taxpayers or sole proprietors who use Form 1040 or 1040 NR, will be using Form 8822 to inform the IRS about their change in their residential address and things like that. But when it comes to businesses uses 8822-B. So in this video, we're going to focus more on this form 8822B that's specifically used by business owners, and we're going to go into some background information and certain key things that you need to know when you're completing this form. Now, to start off, let me throw a word of caution out there that this video is for educational purposes only. It is not meant to be a legal or tax advice. And if at any point in time you need a legal or tax advice, you should always consult with a competent tax attorney, a CPA, or an enrolled agent who can listen to your situation and help you out. I must also emphasize that this video is focusing on Form 8822-B, which is specifically for business entities that wants to have had a change in business address, location, or responsible party. We're not focusing on when a person or an individual taxpayer changes their residential address and therefore needed that change to be done on 1040 or 1040 NR. If you're an individual that have changed your address, you will not be using this form, okay? You will be using a different version of this form, but it is Form 8822 without the B. Okay, individuals will use 8822, and individuals, taxpayers include sole proprietors and those that are filing 1040 and 1040 NR. So with that out of the way, let's focus on the business aspect of this form. Now, why is this form important? Now, we use Form 8822-B to notify the IRS about certain changes, and those are the changes that relates to your business mailing address, your business location, the identity of your responsible party. Okay, and during the course of this presentation, we're going to define who a responsible party is and who needs to sign these forms when it's time for certain changes to be done. Now, it is also important that out of these three requirements, which necessitates you to file the 8822B, the third requirement, which is whenever there's a change of your responsible party, the IRS requires that you change the name of that responsible party. You need to report it on this form within 60 days, within the 60 days of when the change took effect. Okay, so whenever there's a responsible party change within your entity or organization, could be an LLC, a corporation, it could be a partnership. Whenever a responsible party changes, the IRS gives you 60 days to update them. Now, one will ask, why must businesses update their address, location, and responsible party with the IRS? And for three reasons. You need to do this for three reasons, okay? So, first of all, it's important to update your mailing address and location and to ensure that the IRS has your current business address. This prevents miscommunication, notices getting lost in the email. It helps you to receive important tax document and notification promptly. Okay, so for example, if you change an address and the IRS wants to communicate with you, or there's something wrong with a return you sent, or you've got a penalty, which would have given you enough notice to resolve whatever issue that you have with the IRS. But because you did not change the business address on time or the location information on time, the IRS may be sending that information to your old address, which leads to a lot of inconvenience and could cause you to miss certain important due date and notices and all of that. So it's always important that when you're business and you change your mailing address or location, you use Form 8822B to inform the IRS. Now, a responsible party update. the IRS requires that any changes as the business responsible party must be reported to them within 60 days, okay? And you do this by filing this form, which is the basis for this video, Form 8822B. Why is it important that you update responsible party? This is important, okay, to ensure that someone is being held accountable, whether it's for tax reasons or for compliance reasons, okay? So if you, for example, if you have a company that you sold, okay, you own a company, you sold that company, you're no longer, once you sell that company, depending on the terms and the agreement that you have with the buyer, you may no longer be the responsible party. And so you don't want to be responsible for anything that happens after you've sold the company and gotten out of the situation. So it's important that you ensure that that responsible party changes is done so that you're not held accountable for any taxes or compliance issues that arises, okay? Now, the third one is keeping in compliance with the IRS regulation, okay? So all of this, when the IRS gives you an instruction or something to do, the IRS is effectively trying to regulate a certain aspect of information reporting in your business, and it's important that you subject yourself to those regulations. Now here the IRS is saying that if you change responsible party, you need to report those changes within 60 days. So it is up to you as the taxpayer to keep up with those regulations or to those instructions, right? So keeping up with this does not only keep your details current, but it also helps in smooth operation and compliance with IRS regulation. It also helps you to avoid potential penalties. All right. So all of this is important. If you have had a business location change, address change, or responsible party, please make sure that you're updating the IRS on these changes. All right. So one would ask, how do we update our business mailing, address, location, and responsible party with the IRS? Now, we've talked about this form from the beginning. The correct form to use is Form 8822B, as you see on your screen, okay? You use this form to update your address with the IRS. It's also essential for keeping your tax information current. Now, you also need to send it to the right location. As you can see on your screen, the form lists various different address based on your business location. And when we mean business location, based on address where you need to send to, with regards to this form and the instructions, you will send it to the old business location. So look at your old business location and then look at the address, the state in which your old business location or your old business mailing address was located, and then you will find a corresponding IRS address to send the forms to, okay? So the form actually looks at where your old business location is, and once you're able to determine the state in which your old business location or mailing address is, you use the corresponding IRS address to send in your 8822B. Now, all of this matters because you want to keep the IRS informed of your address changes, and it also ensures that you receive all tax-related documents and communications on time, okay? Nobody wants surprises from the IRS. You want to be in the know. You want to know what's going on, and so these changes are important. Now, I have filed thousands of these forms, okay? I have done a lot of 8822B changes, whether it's for a change of address or business location or responsible party, and I've seen some reasons why these forms are rejected, even when you do your best to send them in, right? There are specific instances where the failure to timely update the IRS with Form 882B has led to the rejection of other crucial forms. And one example I can tell you is whenever you file certain forms like entity classification, maybe Form 8832, to elect to kind of classify an entity from one form to the other, okay? And you put a new address in there, which is not already in the IRS system, the IRS may send those forms back to you, whether it's 8832 or Form 25534 S Corp election. If you use an address on those forms that is different from what the IRS has on file, the IRS may return this entity classification forms or the election forms back to you and tell you that the address that you're using the current form is different from what they already have in the system. So if you want to make any changes, you should have first used the 8822B to change your address before putting them on that, before putting the new address on that entity classification form like the 8832 or the 2553. Okay, so a quick example. Let's say you have address A with the IRS already in the past, and you're filling from 8832 or 2553, and you use address B because you think address B is now your new address. Okay, but you haven't informed the IRS about address B. And so using it on this 8832 or 2553 forms can cause a delay. Okay, so unless you've used the 8822B to change the address, using that same address on the 2553 or the 8832 may cause those elections to be delayed or could be rejected. Okay, so if you have an address A on file with the IRS, then it makes sense to use the same address A with when you're filing the entity classification form 8832 or 2553. Okay, so that the addresses are consistent. You cannot have a different address on file with the IRS and then you file this entity classification forms and use a different another address which is totally new to the IRS. Okay, so if you want to change the address on file, always use the 8822B to change the address before you move on to some of these entity classification forms. It's just something that I've seen in my practice. I've had the IRS return those forms back because taxpayers are trying to use an address that on these forms that is different from what the IRS have on file. Okay, so in that experience, as I said, the taxpayer was subsequently advised to file Form 8822B to rectify the address mismatch and then resubmit the 8832, the entity classification form, or the 2553 S-Corp election. Now, another thing that I have seen taxpayers do, or maybe it's based on misunderstanding, is some of them go on USPS website, okay, and then they change the address, forwarding information and all of that, and they think that information is going to reflect with the IRS. But these are totally different things, okay? Now, we all know that after you move, you have to update your address to make sure that your mails catches up with you at any place that you are, whether it's your new home or place of business. And this is typically done through the change of address request with the USPS. Okay, so it enables the redirection of your mails to your new location. However, that change of address that you do with the USPS does not automatically update your address with every agency, especially with the IRS. Okay, so you need, if you want the IRS to have the current information, your current address, you need to use Form 8822B to specifically update your address on file with the IRS. Okay, using the USPS system is a different process altogether. When you do that, that's fine. It helps to redirect your mails to your new location. But if you want the IRS to know your address, change the business address. You need to use the 8822B. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now, another question I get asked a lot is business owners asking me, okay, who should file Form 8822B when ownership of an LLC or any entity changes? Now, here is what I have experienced in my practice. The buyer or the transferee, okay, the buyer or the transferee, the one who is coming into your company and taking over the ownership of the company, is the new responsible party. He's the one obligated to complete and submit the Form 8822B to officially document the change in ownership. Now, what do you do as a seller? You as a seller or the transferor, you must make sure that the buyer has actually changed the ownership, the ownership information with the IRS. And they do this by using Form 8822B. Okay, so ensure that the buyer has sent in these forms to make sure that the required changes have been done. Okay. Now, one thing comes up a lot a responsible party. And the question is, who is a responsible party in a business entity? Now, according to the IRS, a responsible party is the person who ultimately owns or controls the entity, who exercises ultimate effective control over or entitlement to the funds or assets in the entity. That, as a practical matter, enables that same person to directly or indirectly to control, manage, or direct the entity and the disposition of its funds and assets. Now, you can see that the IRS is basically, making this definition very broad to capture anyone that controls the entity, whether directly or indirectly, has ultimate control over or entitlement to the funds or assets. So whenever you see yourself in any of this situation, there's a lot the IRS have stated here in this definition, and most of the time, anyone who formed the company and owns it and capitalized it is the owner. Anyone who has the ability to control and manage the company, make important decisions to company, is generally the responsible party. Anyone that can basically get up, make a quick decision and take funds or asset from the company without anyone objecting to that decision is basically a responsible party. So a responsible party is very broad. If you try to get away with one definition may catch up with you. Okay, so it is what it is. Just read the definition really well, and if you do not understand whether you are most of the time, those who are responsible parties know themselves. Okay, it is only in certain special situations that people want to behave like they are not a responsible party, which kind of gets weird. But if you know, if you know yourself, if you know you're a responsible party, nobody from the outside needs to tell you that you own this company. You should know it yourself. Okay, but then again, there's still some confusion. And so whenever you guys have confusion, you can always try to book an appointment with an attorney or a CPA to help you address that issue as to whether you're a responsible party or not. Now, throughout my practice too, I have seen people, try to be a bit very private and secretive in everything they do. They don't want people to know whether they own the company or not. And that's why in some of the states there's anonymous LLCs, people form companies, but you don't know who is behind it. Now, it's all fine to form a company with a state level and then not have to put your information on there as the responsible party, because some state allows you to be totally anonymous. Now, you can't do that with the IRS, okay? The IRS really wants to know who owns the company. And so if you own a company, just be bold and tell the IRS that you own the company, and by putting your name on there as a responsible party, okay? You cannot put an entity to be the responsible party. We do that, it's going to be rejected. So the point I'm trying to drive is the IRS, you cannot be anonymous in front of the IRS. The IRS want to know who is always behind a certain company, okay? And if you are the owner, you need to disclose your identity to the IRS. The IRS do not share those information, okay? So I know some of you get confused or you get scared that you give your information to the IRS and the information is going to end up somewhere on the internet. But that's not how the federal government works. At least that's not how our tax system works. The tax system respects privacy. And so when you complete this information, they are highly privatized, they are secured in the IRS system, okay? So the IRS will not just give out your information without proper authorization. So any information you give out, whether it's your name as a responsible party or including your social security number, all stays with the IRS, and it's very privatized and it cannot be disclosed unless, in very extreme situations, okay? And it can also not be disclosed until you have given that authority for them to disclose it, okay? So this brings me back to the point, can an entity be a responsible party? I've seen cases where people want to form another entity and then they use that entity to be the responsible party. It's not going to work, okay? The IRS want a natural person to be the responsible party. So when it comes to identifying a responsible party, this role must be filled by an individual, not an entity. This rule is designed to ensure that there's a clear, accountable person who can be contacted regarding the entity's tax obligation and financial activities. Now, the only exception to this rule is when that responsible party is a government entity, okay? So such as a state or a municipal or a city or things like that, they can decide to put, the responsible party as an entity. But all other companies, private, you have to provide a natural person's name as a one who is a responsible party. And the IRS also say that a natural person must be someone who with a social security number or an ITIN. Now, there is an exception here in this statement. Not every business owner has social security or ITIN. So when you're completing this form on 8822B, and you don't have an ITIN or social security because you're a foreign person, you can just put foreign US in there, and that's fine. The form will be processed. But here, if you're relying on this statement, the IRS makes it sound like you have to have a social security or ITIN to complete this form and change responsible party, but you do not. If you're a foreign person and you don't have a social security or ITIN, just put your name on there, and then where it asks for ITIN, just put a non-resident alien or put foreign US, and you're done. Now, people also ask me, what should you do if you don't receive IRS confirmation after updating business information? This happens a lot. It even happens to me. Sometimes I change business information, I send in these forms, and I never hear back from the IRS. I do not get any letter. So what do you do? If you really want to know, okay, the IRS says that, you should expect to receive the acknowledgement within 60 days. And then the letter officially recognizes that your entity has changed. Okay, the entity's changes has been recorded. But that's, based on my practice and based on the knowledge I have and experience, the IRS usually, doesn't send these forms. I don't know if there's a glitch somewhere, but they don't send it. They are saying that they send it within 60 days. At least it's not very consistent. So if there's anyone listening to me from the IRS, maybe this should be very consistent, that once somebody sends in the 8822B, they should receive something within 60 days. But anyway, the IRS also says that if you do not receive this within 60 days, you should prepare and mail a duplicate of the original form 8822B that you completed, and you should mark it as second request, okay, and send it to the same IRS campus that handles your submission. Remember, where is the IRS campus? The IRS campus is the address where you send these forms is based on where your old business address was located. So you look into the chart on your screen. If your old business address was located in a specific state, look into the state and look on your right hand side where you need to send the forms to. It's pretty easy, okay? So here's what the IRS is telling you to do, okay? Now, another way you can get to know whether the IRS have received your, these changes is you can try to request for an EIN confirmation letter, okay? The EIN confirmation letter, when you call to request for it, the IRS may fax it to you while on the phone. Make sure you have a fax number, and then you call the IRS to get the EIN confirmation letter. And when you call it, you get the EIF confirmation letter. It's going to come, when the confirmation letter comes, it's going to state the name of the company. It also usually states who the responsible party is. So when you get that confirmation letter and the old responsible party is still on the form, then it means the changes has not been done, okay? If you get it and the new responsible party is still on the form, then it means the changes has been done. So that's another way you can check whether the changes has been done if you didn't receive a letter from the IRS. All right, so I hope this helps you out, and if it does, please click like, share, and subscribe, and I'll come to you some other time with another video. Thank you very much, and I wish you and your business all the best. Bye.